Today, we're looking at a blue ink by PensBBS. It's their number 217. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, it would help me out a great deal if you check out the entire video. Hi, I'm an ink guy. If you like blue inks, you can check out the playlist of all of the blue inks reviewed here. There are 3 papers used to standardize some of the writing samples: Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia. Let's get into the first of those, 90 GSM Clairfontaine. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen. It does offer a little bits of shading going on. Look at the word iris there. Very nice, from dark blues to much lighter blues. The extra fine is a bit lighter than the stub with no feather, spread, halo sheen. It does offer a bit more shading. It's going from a darker blue to a much darker blue like we see in Quick, where brown is full dark all the way, but it doesn't offer tons of shading all the time. 10 seconds to dry. The medium is darker than the extra fine, about the same tone as the stub. It has no feather, spread, halo sheen. It does offer some moments of shading, like when we look at the word quick here. Now, it took 14 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine shows more color variation than we got in the scrubby of the medium shows more color variation than we got in the extra fine, although I think what we saw there was about the same. The smear says if you smeared it immediately while writing, you might, that's a maybe, able to recover what you wrote. To make sure there's a range of experience with this ink, the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Sailor Riallo with a broad nib was inked up, used for a day, and then used to take the notes for this video. Now, let's take a look at the second standard paper, 52 GSM Tomoe River. No bleeding, very minor ghosting, really very minor for Tomoe River, pretty good. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and no real shading. The extra fine is about the same tone as the stub, with no feather, spread, halo sheen, and no shade, 16 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine and the stub, with no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade, only the benefit of a longer dry time of 21 seconds. The scrubby for both shows no color variation. We didn't expect it, and we didn't get it. Now, the smear says there's a maybe chance to recover it if you smear while you're writing. I agree with Vita that there's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see this very grayish tone at the bottom that's pushing its way up into a dark, rich purple, and it really is gathering at the top. Now, the one on the right was let dry for 10 minutes before it was dunked in the water. That grayish tone is really gathered at the bottom, making me feel like that might be a permanent aspect to this ink, although I'm not expecting a ton of permanence based on how that purple ran away from the water. Now, our third standard writing paper, 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo sheen, and no shade. I mean, there's a dark spot at the X, and there's a dark spot at the T to O, but that's about it. The extra fine is about the same tone as the stub, with no feather, spread, halo sheen, moments of some darker shading. When you look at it, you can see that the brown starts a little bit darker than the rest of the word. Fox goes from slightly lighter to darker. It's like going from a very dark to a very, very dark blue. 12 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, and still some very nice shading, the same kind of shading we got with the extra fine. Goes from a very dark at the beginning of Fox to a very, very dark at the X. And that's the type of shading we're getting here. Much more noticeable in the word quick, where it starts as a dark and then gets very dark, and then goes to dark and to very dark. The word quick really does highlight what this ink can do. 16 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both, looking far left to far right, does show some color variation, and we do get it in the writing. And the smear test says you could certainly recover this if you smeared it while you were writing it. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before it's tested. Looking at the highlighter, it handles itself very well there, much better than expected when we look at what happens with water. There is just a tiny bit of blowout that occurs at the top of the lowercase h, but that might not stop me from using it if I really like this ink. Water is really lifting this up and getting it off of the paper, which probably explains why that so easily got it out of my pen. Pen flush is doing about the same that water did. I wouldn't expect to need pen flush based on the fact that it's not really doing anything more. Now the 1/3 bleach solution you do not need to use. It completely The paper for the additional writing samples is changed up just so that there can be more experience with different papers. Now the first of those other papers is the yellow Rhodia, just to see what kind of a tone variation we might get with yellow paper in an office. Considering that all of the actual performances are the same, the only thing we're looking at is what's going on with the white to the yellow, and it is lightened up just a little bit, much more noticeable in the scrubby. Some of the writing, it does seem like the medium shows a little bit more of the shading, but for the most part we really see that it stays blue and stays safe to use in a work environment if you write on yellow paper. For the inks tested, there's an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. PensBBS 217 has a viscosity of 1.48, making this a very, very wet ink. If you're interested in how the viscosity is tested and how the bell curve is built, then you'll be able to find that video linked here. The next writing sample is done on a gray paper from G. Lalo. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is about the same tone as the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. There are moments of shade to point out, like in quick starting darker, getting a little lighter, and a little darker again. Brown starting darker and getting lighter. So it is there. It still maintains its color very well with a gray backdrop. 7 seconds to dry, which is faster than I need for a correspondence, but it could be helpful if you're just writing up a storm. The medium is much darker than the extra fine or the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shading. 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows no color variation, although the extra fine did give us some. The smear says you probably won't be able to recover this if you smeared while you were writing. To find the average dry times, the writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper are used to average those dry times. That's just put onto a bell curve. Now, for the inks tested, the average dry time is 17 seconds, with a realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. PensBBS number 217 has an average dry time of 15 seconds, making it normal. The last writing sample is done on Strathmore calligraphy paper. Now there's no bleeding and no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen. It does offer some shading. If you look at what's going on in the BBS, it's a little bit lighter than the word iris, but it doesn't seem to shade very much within that writing. It's like the pen was writing a little bit drier here and then got a little bit wetter itself. The extra fine is about the same tone as the stub, with no feather, spread, halo sheen, moments of shading that do occur, like the H in the K in quick, the X in fox, 7 seconds to dry. The medium is a tad bit darker than the extra fine, with no feather, spread, halo sheen. It does shade probably the best of what we've seen. The HE in the is much darker than the T. Quick starts dark, gets lighter, and gets dark again. Brown starts darker, lightens up, and gets dark again at the end of the W into the N. So it's much nicer here. When you look at the word over, you see it very well. 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation, although we did get some in the medium, and the smear test says you're probably not going to recover this if you smear while you're writing. Instead of doing a color comparison to find inks like PensBBS 217, I would prefer to find an ink that complements that blue on the page. I went again with a big red. Apparently I'm on a red kick, or eating up those Akkermans. I chose Akkerman Dutch Masters number 9. If red is not the complement color that you would prefer, then there are links to the playlist down in the description for all of the color playlists here on the channel. So what do I think of PensBBS 217? This has good color variation with different nibs and flow of a pen and some shading, just not tons of it. In a field of blue inks, this one just doesn't stand out enough for me, even though it is a perfectly good blue that I can see people using on a regular basis. What nib and pen will give the best writing experience with this ink? Well, I tend to feel like this can be a dealer's choice because it tends to be very consistent in its performance. I really do think that a dry Western broad is going to help bring out more of that shading that this ink has to offer. I hope you got something out of this video, and be sure to come back tomorrow when we take a look at Edelstein's A La Vigne.